What if I told you that the most expensive city in the world aren't Singapore, not London, not Tokyo, not even New York, but a city most people can't even point out on a map? Care to guess? Well, I bet you haven't heard of Jamena. And care to guess what country it's in? The capital city of Chad. This city's in the middle of the Sahel, with deserts stretching for miles. The only notable geographic feature is Lake Chad, where the country gets its name from, meaning lake. So, let's delve in. Chad is one of the poorest countries in the world. The average person makes about $1,200 a year, so the prices should reflect that, right? Well, even for the average Chadian, the city is expensive, with things like groceries and rent being very high in terms of the average wage. The average Chadian household is usually consisting of a whole family staying in one housing compound. And I mean like grandma and grandchildren under the same roof. Yeah, most people in Chad don't have a lot of aura. But the expensive rent isn't because of Jamena having a high population. About 1.6 million Chads live in Jamena, and the country, 16 million. So the capital makes up about 10% of the population. The city's population density is comparable to that of Karachi, Pakistan, but the city has outskirts stretching beyond the city's proper boundaries, so it isn't that. But if you drove around the country, then you'd see why. The country is the definition of a third world country. The government is corrupt, so the public services are absolutely abysmal. And a lot of the airports in Chad aren't paved either. 7 out of 29 airports in Chad are paved. Or well, at least the ones I could find, that is. But the true wealth of the country is what's underneath those runways. Or lack thereof. Well, beneath Chad's sands and soils, there are massive deposits of oil, bauxite, diamond, silver, titanium, wolframite? What the fuck? What is that? Oh, that's interesting. And most importantly, uranium. Though Chad isn't the richest in minerals in its neighborhood though. But despite that, again, why is Chad not utilizing its resources? Well, it is. But where is the money exactly going? It's a given that it goes to the country's autocratic rulers. But what's really under the cover? Well, Chad doesn't even control its own currency. Where the fuck are we? Greece? Yeah, same. Well, of a matter of fact, neither does the rest of West Africa. And it's all pulled together by one country. France.
Hold up, these countries gained independence over 60 years ago. In fact, most of them gained independence in the same year, 1960. Not only that, the same month.
If you're wondering, it was August. I don't want to play with you anymore. Ooh, shiny. I'm a great overlord. I don't think I want to sign this contract. Yeah, I think I want to leave. Hey, you know what? I'm out of here. Fuck you.
Fatality.
That's the best way I could visualize the decolonization process. So, what does this exactly say? You better buy my course, boy. But what was in the contract? Or well, treaties. So, let's look at them. First of all, money.
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Chad has to still use the CFA franc as it has used since French rule. And it has to deposit 50% of its earning to France. I don't know what's worse, Gooners sending half their paychecks to chicks on the internet, or that. The Gooners get to screw, and Africa gets screwed. Not only that, Chad has to give up its gold and oil, and just about everything else in the country. To who? Well, multinational corporations, baby! Total, Orano, Air France, Nestle.
Je suis suisse, pas français.
Sorry, I don't speak baguette. Was that racist? Who cares, it's Nestle. You're not forced to buy Nestle products, but for Chad, it's a different story. They have to buy military, construction, infrastructure equipment, medicine, cars, food, and even their own oil. Well, at least it ain't France this time. But most importantly, boats. In this sad excuse of a lake? And who's this guy? He's Mehmet Debi, the president of Chad. His father, Idris Debi, was a military dictator and ruled Chad with an iron fist. He was a military advisor for President Abre in the Toyota War against Libya, whereas the name suggests was fought with DIY tanks turned Toyotas, against first-class MiG-21s and 23s from Libya. Guess who won? Wrong! Well, if you guessed Chad, you're right, and Chad regained control of the Azu Strip. Was it really worth it?
Look, it's about the principle, okay? The peace was my gift to Africa. Look, man, you have to hear the true story.
After the Toyota War, Idris Deby led a coup against Habre. Of course, Chads were pretty pissed off because most alpha males, most people don't like military dictatorship ruling over them. So, after a couple of rebellions, but hold on, not so quick. First of all, who are the Chads? To put it shortly, we have to look at a climate map of Chad. It's split into 3 evenly split zones: desert, arid, and savanna, the Sahara, the Sahel, and Sudan. You may have not heard of this one. Neither did I. The Sahara and Sahel are majority Muslim, and the Sudan part of the country is majority Christian and traditional African religions. What about the ethnic groups? Care to guess? Did you guess it right? It was 200. For $500, how many languages are spoken in the country?
All on 200.
Nope. Chad is home to 120 languages, and sometimes they don't get along.
What the fuck did he say about my mother, you fucking piece of shit?
A word in Sahara might just be a celebration, but in Chadian Arabic, it sounds like you're swearing at someone's mother. With so many different interests, whenever a southerner or a northerner would come to power, there would be mass revolutions, and unrest to topple the power dynamic to their side. And other countries like Sudan and Libya would intervene too, mostly on the northerners' side. But this time it was Sudan. After another civil war broke out in the country, it leaked over to Chad. With Sudanese refugees fleeing, government forces aided Deby's rivals who had turned against him because of corruption in the government. And I don't know why. He just wanted to run for re-election for his 3rd term and change the constitution so only the president can change it, while he is also president. But I don't think Deby was taking it lying down though. He also supported rebels in Sudan and his own ethnic group, the Zagawa, who have a sizable population in Sudan. So I kinda lied. It's more of a war between Chad and Sudan than a civil war in both countries. At the end, it caused a massive humanitarian crisis. What's more confusing is that Libya and Sudan helped Deby get into power in the first place. But at the end of the conflict, Sudan was the loser, with an unstable Darfur and South Sudan gaining independence in 2011, which also ended up like Sudan. After the civil war, Chad was alright, while being the 26th poorest country in the world, just ahead of Sierra Leone and Afghanistan. But it has experienced worse, so... But everything was going steadily until... Boko Haram, a pretty new jihadist group originating from Goza, Nigeria. Now, for some context, Nigeria is the largest economy in Africa, but highly unequal, with about 50% of the population in multidimensional poverty. That's about, not so good. Nigeria isn't good with bureaucracy, corruption, or law. Talking about laws, just before the creation of Boko Haram, 12 Nigerian states, east to west, enshrined Sharia into their state laws. But some Islamic fundamentalists thought it was corrupted, and not the true version of the Quran. This is to put it shortly. Remember, this is about Chad, not Nigeria. And not to help, northern Nigeria is the least developed part of the country. And with a young population and no opportunities, Boko Haram rose to be the largest Islamist group. Note, Islamist, not Islamic. The first ambition of Boko Haram was to restore the old Kanem-Borno Empire, which happened to include most of Chad. By the previous few years, the group had already taken control of most of Borno and Gombe state, Lake Chad, northern Cameroon, and a small part of Niger, and would commit attacks around the region. The group had also joined ISIS as the province of West Africa, of what they would call the Islamic Caliphate. In 2015, Chad, Nigeria, Cameroon, Niger, and Benin would wage war on ISIS. After the intervention, Boko Haram would lose most of its territory, though its brutal ways wouldn't die with it. But that's outside the scope of this video. The main consequence for Chad wasn't the attacks themselves, but the amount of spending that was spent on the military, and an overall more unstable Sahel, with the NATO invasion of Libya in 2011 and a civil war breaking out in the Central African Republic. It also paralyzed the country's services even further with a cholera outbreak in Lake Chad, which authorities struggled to prevent. Skipping forward to 2021, Idris Deby died in an offensive in northern Chad, right after winning his 6th term as president, with 79% of the votes. I don't see anything wrong here. Well, now that he's gone, Chad becomes a democracy, right? A military council was formed with his son as the president, suspended Chad's constitution, and arrested all the opposition leaders. All of these factors make Chad very unpleasant to invest in, and I think unpleasant is an understatement. And without proper connections, everything had to be flown in, or transported by poorly maintained roads in Nigeria. And this makes Jamena the most expensive city in the world for expats and locals. Chad's elites live like Chads, and the common Chad lives like a beta. And Chad really hasn't gone anywhere ever since. But the future, we can only tell.